can see clearly now, the rain is gone.
Hi, I'm Don Waite.
I'm Mike Wiebe.
And I'm Chris Dorman.
And welcome back to So What? If you have not seen the last 2 weeks of podcasts, then we would want you to stop right now and go back and watch 2 weeks ago and then the one last week. So Jesus Wants You to Be Rich.
Yes.
And Crime Scene. We were talking about the inductive Bible study method. And last week, we started the process of showing you how that works with the first step of observation. And with crime scenes, we're asking people actually to come in past the yellow tape to take a look at the text with us.
And what text are we looking at, Don?
We are looking at James chapter 1, and we began with verses 1 through 4 last week, and then we asked you to do some homework to get ready for this week and look at verses 5 through 8.
So as a reminder, this is what we did last week. Let's put that up on the screen for you. And so now, that's a refresher. That's where we were last week. And so this week, we all took the time and looked at verses 5 through 8. So we're just going to talk about our observations, and we'll sort of put more pictures on the screen so you can see what we're doing. We want you to compare to what you have done as well. Okay? Let's see if we see the same things. Let's see what things maybe you saw that maybe we missed. That'd be very cool.
Yes.
Be very cool. All right? So first of all, if we're looking at this, something that I noticed that I didn't recall looking at before, recall at the end of verse 4, he's talking about completion, and that steadfastness results in completion. And then in line 8, or verse 5, he's talking about a lack, right? So at the end of verse 4, he says, you're going to lack nothing if you're steadfast. Right. But here in the next verse, he says, if you lack wisdom. So there's a connection between steadfastness and wisdom. There's a connection there. Is that a contrast? Is that a comparison? What would you call that, Mike?
I would say there's a connection there. He's comparing, not exactly comparing maybe, but he's linking, he's connecting the two.
So that's something you want to. That's something you want to look at, right?
Right.
There's some kind of connection there. Yeah.
Right. And again, we can talk in the interpretation part. What does that connection look like? Right now, we're focusing on observation, so we don't get ahead of ourselves. Right. Because if we get ahead of ourselves, we're going to miss stuff. Right. And we want to dig in as deep as we can.
Right. So we're not answering, what it means. We're not answering that yet. Okay. We're just trying to figure out what it says. Okay. What does it say? Okay.
So Don, anything that you?
Well, there's another observation I made, which is in line 10, verse 6, the use of the word faith again. So we see that up in line 5 earlier that he says that the testing produces, or the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And now again, we bring up, let him ask in faith. So when I'm asking for wisdom, there's this faith connection again.
Right. And so the two different aspects of faith, the testing of the faith, but then asking in faith. That'd be an opportunity to explore how he sees faith, how we should understand our faith.
Yes.
And what you see, though, is you see a connection, though, between those passages. And beloved, that's important because many people look at the book of James as sort of a hodgepodge of material, kind of like the Proverbs. Many people have described this as the New Testament Proverbs. But what you'll see, if you do this inductive Bible study throughout the rest of the text, that that's not the case at all.
Right. Because the paragraph breaks weren't there to begin with. James didn't break it into paragraphs like this. The editors, the translators do that for our help, to help us to follow the text. But that can actually almost be a distraction.
Yeah.
So whenever you see paragraph breaks, look for connections. What is the author's thought process? How is he trying to explain his ideas that for us in our grammar it's helpful in paragraphs? But what are the connections? For example, at the end of verse 4, line 7, he talks about lacking in nothing, and then immediately he uses the same word. If you lacks wisdom, so the goal is to be lacking in nothing. But if there is a condition, something that might happen, it might happen that you don't have the wisdom to understand something. So here again, those paragraphs are very connected.
And this doubt is he repeats the word. Remember last week we looked at how steadfastness was repeated. Repeated words are important words. Okay, it's something the writer wants you to see. Okay, so he repeated steadfastness last week, you may recall, and in this passage we see that the word doubting is repeated. right?
And then doubts.
And not only repeating the same word, which is very important, but also related words or related ideas. For example,
Yes.
in line 8, double-minded and even wave. We can talk about the figurative language of a wave and what that looks like. But the idea of doubt, waves, double-minded, those are all connected ideas
Yes.
that will help us understand, kind of flesh out what James is thinking about when he thinks about doubt.
Remember, last week we looked at steadfastness and how important that was to the writer and to the author, to James. Now look here in line 14. In line 8, it says he's a double-minded man. Line 14, unstable in all he does. You contrast that. Remember, steadfastness last week was used twice. It's an important term. Now here we have he's unstable. So here we have, this would be a contrast,
Absolutely,
right?
a contrast.
It's a contrast.
Two different ideas, and looking at both sides of those two ideas, again, will give us a clearer idea of what is James concerned about. Is steadfastness this kind of generality that he's using? Or is he concerned about particular types of instability and doubt and double-mindedness?
Right. So did you see that? Did you see that connection, that contrast as you were going through it? And if you didn't, don't be discouraged. That's okay. Because I remember when we first started doing this together, it was a lot of fun. It's something I had done many, many years ago and sort of forgotten about. But the more you do this, the more you see.
Yes.
So if there's a bunch of stuff we're talking about that you didn't see, that's okay. That's all right. The important thing is that you're starting the process.
And we're excited to hear from you. If you saw stuff that we
Yes,
haven't brought up, we want to hear
Please.
from you. Give us some comments, share with us. Take a
Yes.
photo of if you downloaded this and did this with us, and take a photo of it and share it with us so we can see what you saw.
We'd love
If this is encouraging to you, it will be very encouraging to us for you to do that. For
Yes.
you to share with us what you're seeing.
Yes.
That's a great blessing, because I want to learn from you guys.
Yeah. And remember, we're just observing. We're not trying to interpret. We're not trying to imply. We're just observing. What does the text say? Okay? That's all we're trying to do. So we've just gone through now. We've gone through the first 8 verses of chapter 1 of James. What do you want us to do for next week, Mike?
I would like us to then take this as a starting point to look at what questions does this information raise.
Okay.
Interpretation, observation, interpretation, and application are all about questions. But the questions we ask in observation are primarily about the facts, the grammar, the wording that's used. Interpretation, we get to talk about what does that mean? What does he mean by steadfastness? How is steadfastness different from instability? What does it mean to have faith that can be tested and yet we need to have it? Those are the kind of questions that we'll begin asking. So as you're looking at the passage this week, in addition to sending us your great observations, start writing down questions. What are questions that come to mind? Why did he say it this way? What does this mean? How are waves like doubt? Those kinds of questions are the gateway, the beginning point of great interpretation.
Which is the second step
Right.
in the inductive Bible study process. Observation, interpretation, application.
Right, because the better our observation, the more accurate our interpretation, the more personal and applicable our application will be to see what does God want us to get out of this passage. This is not just an academic exercise.
That's right.
But we want it to be an accurate, a clear exercise to see just what God wants to teach us from these passages.
So that's your homework, okay? I hope you're encouraged about this as I am. I'm really enjoying this. I hope you are too. Thank you for tuning in, my friends, and I'll talk to you next week.
See you soon.